Hello, and there's a big difference between winging it and seeing what happens. Now let's see what happens. Welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my human shield and co-host, Andrew Williams. How you doing today, Andrew?
I'm pretty good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you. It's been a long time since we've sat down and recorded a proper Best of the Rest episode. For listeners, it's been just 1 week since we were talking about A Night at the Roxbury, but for us, it's 6 months, Andrew? It's been a minute. It's been a while.
It's been a little bit, yeah. But the movie magic, or the audio magic of podcasts allows us to do all of this in a way that for you, the listener, is seamless.
I think in that A Night at the Roxbury recording, I was talking about how there's a hurricane coming the next day. And then I lost power for 2 days, lost my entire fridge. That sucked. Ordered a generator, so I won't have to go through that again. Don't know why I didn't have one of those already, living in Houston. So I am now hurricane prepared. Also
it's nuts that you need to buy one. That's the point.
Sure.
It's like it's still objectively nuts that, well, I live in Houston, I better get a generator, is a statement that you need to say out loud. Like, you shouldn't need to have one of those.
You know, certain we get hit with a pretty bad hurricane every, 5 years or so, where it's like no amount of preparation could have prevented the damage and destruction and power outages. This particular one was not that bad, but because of a lot of factors, we were not prepared for it. Not we as my household, but we as in the city of Houston and the state and the nature of our grid and what have you. And it caused pretty drastic power outage. I was, 2 days of that power for me, it's actually lucky. Some people were straight up 5 days, 7 days, extreme cases a little bit longer than that. It was pretty widespread, pretty wild. Yeah, it's crazy. I have to have a generator to be prepared, but it's what it is. So it's what I got. It's what I'll be doing. Also took a family vacation to Universal Studios in Florida. That was great. Never been there before. Had a lot of fun. Andrew, you were on a plane as well. You came down to visit here in Houston.
I did.
Saw some family, got to see me. We hung out. We watched a movie together. We watched New York Ninja from Vinegar Syndrome. I believe we talked about, or at least I talked about purchasing that movie previously on the podcast. But Andrew, you want to talk about the experience of watching New York Ninja?
Yeah, I remember it like it was 2 weeks ago, but it was a Monday night. It was warm, humid. We had just been to Torchy's Tacos.
Okay, yeah, all of this is true, Andrew. But what would you say is the hook of watching this movie? I mean, I had a great time watching it. Ninja, I think you did too.
I think this is an interesting concept of simply. I think it would be interesting to take any movie and kind of do this thought experiment with just the idea, because the hook of New York Ninja is that this company, Vinegar Syndrome, had basically in its archives all of the raw footage from a movie that was shot in the 80s called New York Ninja. I don't remember the director star's name. Was it John Liu? But John Liu, I was correct. But it was never finished. And so this guy at Vinegar Syndrome, I believe his name was Curtis Spieler, found all these reels, but realized all the audio had been lost as well. And there was really no script. So what he had was a bunch of raw footage with no audio and no script. So he did find some information about it, but what he essentially did was rebuilt it into a whole new film. Now, some of it is clearly like dialogue that's close to what's being said in the scenes, but he redubbed all the dialogue, he added all new audio effects, and built a story out of the footage that they had. And on that level alone, it's a tremendous achievement.
It really is. The joy of watching it is like, okay, I see what this... I mean, it comes together in a cohesive story, relatively.
Yeah.
And so, like, I see the story is being told by our new director, but you're constantly wondering well, what was the intention of the original director? What was the original dialogue here? Why is this man touching plutonium? Like, what was the original vision versus the new vision? And it's just fascinating how those two cross, and you get this bonkers, over the top action movie, which is just fun on its own. Like, watching a low budget Hong Kong style movie from the 80s is fun, but this one has this whole new layer of the reinterpretation by a new director that makes it just truly a one of a kind experience. If you get a chance to grab this movie, I highly recommend it, from Vinegar Syndrome. I think it might actually be streaming as well. I think maybe Amazon has it. So it is a blast. Granted, if you know all the backstory, I think is really key to making this super entertaining. I did see like critic reviews are pretty high for the reasons we've mentioned, but a lot of like audience reviews are pretty low. They're like, what is this garbage? Which maybe if you have no context, it's a little bit harder to find the entertainment, I might say. But I certainly, I had a blast with it. I'm glad we got to watch that.
I think I see both sides of it. It's something where the achievement itself kind of supersedes. Like it's weird to say it, but the achievement of the film almost supersedes the film itself. Where like the story of how it exists is almost the more interesting story, and it's hard to not carry that into the film if you know what that story is. But if you don't know what that story is and you're watching it without context, you'd probably be like, why is there a random plutonium possessing serial killer in this movie? This doesn't make any sense. But and I would agree with you. But what I just find so interesting is they don't know who any of these people are except the director. They don't know who any of these actors are.
Yeah,
like none of the actors
can't even
in this
like
movie,
properly
they can't find who they are. Like there's no credits, there's no information, there's no anything, and I can only assume that like they tried to do their due diligence when they were making it, of like trying to find out who these people were. Like John Liu is still alive. Like I don't know why. I can only assume they potentially reached out to him and he was like not interested, or he just didn't respond. I don't know what he's been doing lately, if anything. I don't know that he did a whole lot since, but it is just super interesting to me that there's no information about this original production, but also that they weren't able to find anything. Like even now, it's like, has anybody in this movie come forward and been like, oh yeah, that's me? Like literally the people in the movie, we don't know who they are, and that's insane to me that there's absolutely no available information on any of them. And that, because like, I guess none of them really went on to do anything else. None of them really appeared in any other stuff, but like, it's wild.
It is wild, Andrew. It is an interesting thought experiment. Like, what if you did this with other films? Surely there's other lost footage out there. I wonder if anyone's going to be ambitious enough to attempt something like this again. Dare I say, if you were to take an 80s American action movie and write brand new dialogue on top of it, maybe with a comedic slant, you might land somewhere close to the movie we are talking about today. Because each week we take a second look at a movie that was poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's SNL month, and this week we're talking the 2010 film MacGruber. Andrew, what is your history with this movie? Or with this character in its original incarnation on SNL?
None.
None? Zero? Have you seen the movie before?
I have watched this movie once at your urging, back when Movies Anywhere allowed you to screen share movies, and basically you would send it to me. I would not watch it. You would send it to me again. I would not watch it. You would send it to me. Like, you used up one of your passes every week, basically sending me MacGruber endlessly, en masse, until finally I watched it, and that was maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So I have watched MacGruber once before this. I have seen the skits on SNL, obviously. I know that they made a show about it later, more recently. I think that the show came after I did watch the movie, and so I did not watch the show. So you can probably gather what my general enthusiasm is for MacGruber based off of all of this, but yeah, and not a whole lot there.
Gather what my enthusiasm was based off of your story. I actually forgot I did that. I forgot I would just unsolicitedly send you the link to MacGruber, so it hopes you would watch it one day. Yes, I love this movie. It is among my favorite comedies, and I never saw the sketches on SNL. My introduction to MacGruber is actually The Office. Michael Scott dresses up as MacGruber in one of the Halloween episodes, and in the cold open, he like reenacts one of the skits and goes, MacGruber! And I had no idea what he was referencing. Like, I knew it was SNL because like Michael Scott watches SNL, but I had never seen those sketches. So jump forward way past 2010. This movie comes out, doesn't make much of an impact, but I continue to like hear about it years later from like comedians and writers and podcasts and people that are like, that movie MacGruber they made was actually pretty funny. Like, people were sleeping on it. I recommend you checking it out. So I bought this movie blind just after hearing about it numerous times. I think maybe early pandemic or shortly you know what I think it was? I think it was shortly after my son was born in 2020. So it was during the pandemic. And I think my mom was staying with us to help with the baby. And I'm like, I've heard about this comedy. Like, I think I paid like full price for it, like $10 or something, so I could finally buy it and watch it. First time I watched it was just me and my mom watching
dear
MacGruber.
Oh, man.
It was
woof.
At times an awkward experience, as reasons we'll get into, or if you've seen this movie, maybe you could start imagining why. But I loved the movie. I thought it was hilarious. My mom liked it. She thinks it's funny. I don't know if she's watched it again since, but had a good time watching it. And then I did go back and see some of the sketches. I mean, talk about bare bones. I mean, the sketches are literally like less than a minute long. Most of them, I think, are like 30 to 45 seconds. The whole joke is, MacGruber, MacGyver. There's a bomb that's about to go off. He's a terrible
version of MacGyver. That's the joke.
He assembles a bunch of items, but takes too long, and then it explodes, and they die. That's the joke every single time.
That's the joke of MacGruber. He is a terrible MacGyver. That's it.
And they turned that into a 90-minute movie. Apparently, I'm reading there was like a Super Bowl ad that might have been high profile that establishes that MacGruber's son, I think, is the joke of that ad. I have
there
not
is
seen
a
that
there is a MacGruber there is a MacGruber sketch where I believe his father is present, and he's played by Richard Dean Anderson, who played MacGyver. Well, I don't know that it was explicitly like a line drawn that said MacGruber is MacGyver's son, but just they did have some fun by bringing in Richard Dean Anderson to do that.
And you know what, Andrew? That is fun.
It is fun.
That is fun. But this movie comes out May 21st of 2010. It was made on a budget of $10 million, but despite that low budget, still doesn't make any kind of profit. It makes just $9.3 million at the box office. It's pulled from theaters after 3 weeks. Critically, not well received, although I wouldn't say it's panned. It holds a 47% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Not great. I personally am shocked to see the audience score is even lower at 35%. So at the time of its release, it's really just not clicking with anybody. Makes no money. Pretty big loss for the studio.
I must clarify. Apparently, according to MacGruber's Wikipedia page, his father is Angus MacGyver, meaning MacGruber's name is MacGruber MacGyver.
I mean, that's hilarious. That's a good joke.
That is not bad. Yeah, I gotta say that. Yes, but yeah. Anyway, as far as this goes, yeah, the people don't show up. Doesn't even make back its budget, let alone advertising costs or anything like that. Like I said, gets pulled super quick.
And apparently in 2010, we're still selling DVDs. I don't know if the market's strong enough to recoup too much of that budget, though.
It does eventually get the show, though. So there is some kind of legacy that does get born out of this that they saw worth revisiting. The
movie certainly has its fans and defenders, such as myself, as well as another Christopher. One Christopher Nolan is said to be a huge fan of this movie. Anne Hathaway mentioned that he would quote the movie on the set of The Dark Knight Rises, and it's sort of snowballed into like popular culture from there. He was invited to the table read of the Peacock series that they eventually made, I think in 2020 or 2021. Wasn't able to attend, but he did send a very thoughtful letter to the cast and crew that they're able to read and get everybody hyped up. And I think it ends with Christopher Nolan saying the world is watching and the world is waiting, which is pretty epic. So this movie, Andrew, it has its fans.
Yes, it does.
Taking a look at the creative team, it's written by Will Forte, John Solomon, and Jorma Taccone. Essentially, a trio from Saturday Night Live. These are the original writers and creators and actors involved in the sketch. They are tapped to write the feature-length version. Will Forte we'll have a chance to talk about pretty extensively later in this episode. Jorma is our director. We'll talk about him more in just a moment. But John Solomon, mostly doing work alongside Will Forte as his writing partner. They collaborate pretty extensively on The Last Man on Earth, which, surprise of no one at this point, probably is one of my favorite TV shows of all time. Absolutely hilarious. So I love the duo's work.
Yeah. If you've basically seen almost anything that Will Forte is like the featured person in, there's a really good chance that John Solomon is along with him for the ride. So makes sense that he's brought in to shepherd this through. I believe all three of these men also eventually work on the television show, and I believe John Solomon even directs some episodes of that television show.
Our director of this movie, Jorma Taccone, gotta be most known for being a member of the Lonely Island. So he's in all of their projects. He directs Popstar, Never Stop, Never Stopping, which, Andrew, I think is another movie that I persisted that you watch as well, correct?
Yeah, that was another. You didn't push it as hard as MacGruber, but you did definitely suggest that I watch Popstar because I had heard about Popstar and had never seen it. And I think I told you the story that I thought the movie was very different because there was a steelbook of it released that featured them fighting like aliens with flamethrowers on the cover or something.
Yes. A scene that is, the joke is that it's not in the movie.
Heard.
Yeah.
And so watching the movie, I was kind of like, oh, so we must be going for like a big like third act twist here. With like, this is the story. I'm like, and like the whole time I'm watching it, I'm just like, no, all right. And then the credits started rolling and I was like, what? Like I was genuinely kind of confused. And I was like, that's it. And so I did enjoy that one though. That one's a lot more, that one worked for me a lot more.
I do love that steelbook. I don't own it. I need to.
I don't either. But yeah, that still sticks in my head. Just that image, and that's literally what I thought the movie was. And then I was like, why haven't you watched this? If it's about a pop star who has to fight aliens, why aren't you? And then I watched it, and I was like, he doesn't fight aliens at all.
I'm pretty sure Popstar also bombed in theaters, Andrew, and maybe a future episode of our podcast. But today, it's all about MacGruber. Are you ready to jump into this?
Yes.
When the notorious terrorist Dieter von Kunth steals a nuclear warhead, the United States military turns to one man to bring him down, MacGruber. Even though he has been retired since Kunth murdered his bride-to-be on their wedding day, he agrees to help and finally get his revenge. After recruiting Vicky St. Elmo and Army rookie Dixon Piper, the trio set off to track down Kunth and stop his evil plans with throat rips, clever engineering, and a stick of celery. Andrew, let's jump into this movie. Plot, pretty standard action affair stuff. It's pretty heavily lifting from something like Rambo. One man is just so far above and beyond everyone else, but he's retired. You got to pull him back in. There's personal stakes.
Yeah, like Commando, something like that too. Just that kind of 80s bravado. Clearly I'm out of the game, coach. I can't get back in, but I need you. All right.
The game has changed, but the players are the same. We're gonna talk about all of the wonderful quotes and scenes of this movie, but first we will be talking about the cast, and we're gonna start with the high point, the best casting, best performance in the movie, because every episode we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the call of duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, and we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, kick us off. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for MacGruber?
Chris, I would actually like you to go first.
Well, Andrew, you know who I'm giving it to. It's Will Forte as the titular MacGruber. MacGruber, as we learned his full name might actually be. Will Forte is my guy. I mean, just I always think of this line in Zombieland with Bill Murray. And I think it's Emma Stone that says, I think the whole scene, I'm trying to remember now, she laughs as he's dying because he makes a funny sound. And she's like, I'm sorry, he's got a direct line to my funny bone. Like, every little thing he does is hilarious. That's Will Forte. Every comedic decision he makes is a 10 out of 10 for me and just sends me spiraling. I mean, I've already talked about Last Man on Earth. I absolutely love that TV show. Really recommend everyone go and check that out. I didn't watch SNL during his tenure. I just wasn't watching at all, but I've gone back and see certain sketches and stuff. I think he's hilarious there. And really here, MacGruber, the movie, is what starts off my love affair with Will Forte and his work. I think exactly that. Every line delivery, every decision, every ridiculous face that he makes puts me in stitches. This is one of the easiest Mark Strong Awards I've ever had to do. I think he holds everything together as our lead. Will Forte, big emphatic Mark Strong Award.
Yeah. I would like to give it to somebody else, but I just don't quite think he's in the movie enough to really match the level at which Will Forte is putting into this character. So, you know what? I'll still give it to that person, but I need to acknowledge that, like, this movie is carried on Will Forte's back. Like, it is clearly his thing. He is clearly the one that is literally just carrying it from start to finish. It is his character. He takes this, you could clearly tell that, like, you know, he's not necessarily being serious, but, like, he's taking the fact that this gets to be a movie very seriously. He's putting everything he has into it. And you can't deny that. And the movie is better for it. Like, if he were not all in on this, it would show. And he is. And he's steadfast in his delivery of everything, even when everybody around him is just like, what? That's dumb. And he's like, it's not dumb yet. But it's very, very evident that he is just giving his all to this. So I had no question that this is where you were going to go with this. So that's why I wanted you to go first. I wanted you to lead off straight from the top. I mean,
it's certainly a Will Forte vehicle, and this might just be fresh on my mind because I recently rewatched the first Ace Ventura. Mutual friend Doug was telling us that there's a TV cut of that movie with scenes you've never seen before. So, of course, I tracked down a copy online and put it on my Plex, and I watched the extended TV cut of Ace Ventura. The new scenes are, in fact, very funny, but that movie is a vehicle for Jim Carrey in every sense of the word. Like, he is using bits from his stand-up incorporated to the movie. Like, when he came on board, he transformed what that movie was, and the whole movie's built around his performance and highlighting what he does. And I feel like MacGruber is very similar to Will Forte. Like, his sensibilities are in every fiber of this movie. He's clearly the lead creative force behind the film.
He is. So in that regard, makes perfect sense that he sits at the top for you. Obviously, I'm not nearly as big of a Will Forte fan as you are, but I can't deny the work he is putting into this. That being said,
I want to recommend for people just a few things for move on from Will Forte.
My gosh.
Voice work. If anybody ever watched Clone High, he's Abraham Lincoln. I love that show. Big recommend. But if anybody is curious about Will Forte, where he's maybe toning back some of his usual Will Forte isms, I highly recommend the Netflix movie A Futile and Stupid Gesture about Doug Kinney. Excuse me. I said that right. Doug Kinney, the founder of National Lampoon. A pretty unique biopic. I really like the creative liberties that they take to tell that story. And it's really good. And you get little bit deeper emotion, heartfelt stuff from him at times. I think it's just a good sort of juxtaposition with his usual performances. So I wanted to shout that out.
That one's interesting to watch too, just because how many it's interesting to watch all the modern comedians play the old comedians. Guys
Joel
like
McHale
Joel
as
McHale
Chevy
Chase, and like
which
Seth
has
Green
the
plays
added ripple of Community, and their
tenuous relationship there. But you've also got like Seth Green as Christopher Guest. You've got Rick Glassman as Harold Ramis. You've got John Gemberling as John Belushi. John Daly as Bill Murray. Like there's a lot of like people playing other people and it's all like they don't look anything like them in a lot of cases. Like Joel McHale looks nothing like Chevy Chase, but it's all for the sake of telling this story, which is a story that a lot of these guys have wanted to tell for a long time. So it is a very interesting movie to watch. I do like that one a lot. So Will Forte also showed up in the recent Scott Pilgrim cartoon in a very funny role, but I ain't going to tell you what it is because I keep telling you to watch it. But
okay, I do got to check it out.
But it's on Netflix, so you're never going to watch it, right?
Well, when WWE finally moves to Netflix, I will have to resubscribe. Right. Also, just found out that there's some new Sailor Moon movies coming to Netflix. So, friend of the show, my wife, will absolutely be subscribing. So, yeah, it'll be back at my house soon enough.
All right. Scott Pilgrim takes off. Just generally very good. But Will Forte shows up in a couple episodes as a character, and it's very, very funny. But anyway, that being said, there's an actor in this movie who I love very much. And this is one of his last kind of major roles, if you want to call it that. It's kind of one of the last big... I don't know how big... I really don't know how much of a vehicle the MacGruber movie really was for him. Or for at that point for anybody. But almost everything he's done since then has been kind of very... small budget, direct video, with very few exceptions. And I got to talk about my boy, Val Kilmer's. He shows up here as our villain, Dieter von Kunth. So I could just literally just read names and Chris is going to start laughing. That's how I could literally just read the script to Chris right now and he would just laugh the whole time.
This is a movie that makes Powers Booth say the word Kunth multiple times. How can you not love it?
You got me there. I can't deny that. Powers Booth, we'll talk about him more in a bit, but just the fact that he plays this movie completely straight the whole time is just wonderful. But anyway, so Val Kilmer shows up as Dieter von Kunth, who also largely plays it pretty straight. He's actually mostly just kind of annoyed by MacGruber the whole time because he doesn't really see him as a threat. Like, anytime MacGruber shows up and says something, like, Val Kilmer just deadpans response, and it genuinely is just hilarious to me. Like, he shows up at, like, he's doing the gambling session. He shows up and he's like, I hope that girl likes getting date raped. He's like, that's my daughter. And MacGruber's like,
Or Kunth will like make fun of MacGruber, but MacGruber's too dumb to realize he's being made fun of, so he has to explain the joke to him.
Like towards the end when he's like, and here's your manifesto, MacGruber, that shows you hated the government and wanted to strike back at them. And he's like, I didn't write that manifesto, Dieter. I didn't do it. Somebody's trying to
I'm being framed. You have to believe me.
And Dieter's the one that has to go, me, I'm framing you, dumbass. So Val Kilmer, I think, sells all of that perfectly. It's so good. It's so funny. And leans into it the whole way. Val Kilmer, obviously, we've talked about him before a variety of times at this point, I think. I know we did Batman Forever. Red Planet. So we're no strangers to our boy Val Kilmer's.
He's probably received a Mark Strong Award, but there's just no way for us to go back and
check. No way to check at all. But I like him a lot. And like I said, this is oddly like one of his last big performances, like theatrical. It seems strange to see that.
His last big performances before throat cancer and what that...
Well, throat cancer's 5 years after this. I mean, there's still a good few years after this where he's still out there. He does a few things, like a couple of voice things and a couple of bigger things, but like largely, and then in 2015 he has the throat cancer and things like that. He does show up in like The Snowman in 2017, and I don't know if I mentioned it on the show. It's one of the strangest performances I've ever seen.
Do they use the AI voice, or what do they do?
They dub him, but they dub him terribly. Like, it's so like he's in scenes. It's clearly him, and he's clearly got like he's been through some stuff between MacGruber and the Snowman, but he's in that movie, and anytime he's speaking, they you would assume they just cut around his face when he's talking, but then they'll show his face while he's talking, and what he's saying and his lips don't match at all. He just clearly looks dubbed. And it's clearly something where it feels like he was supposed to be a larger part of the film, but because of his limitations, they had to cut it back. That movie is also a mess just because the director full on said that when they got to the editing room, they realized they were missing 10% of the story. And I was like, well, that's a problem. And it shows in the final product.
I'm sure.
I hope not. But it's I mean, the lead character's name is Harry Hole, so if you're in for laughing again, there you go. But,
Harry, is it a joke in the movie?
No, it's there's a Swedish pronunciation, so it's probably not pronounced Hole, but seeing it written on a page, come on, you can't help. And yeah, anyway. So I like Val Kilmer a lot. I love his deadpan here, how he's just one of those guys that's just not at all really entertaining MacGruber's nonsense, because the whole movie is a lot of people basically doubting MacGruber, which obviously comes to bite them later. But I love Val Kilmer, and I love seeing him in a big role, and I love seeing him kind of lean into being the villain here. And it's great. So I'm going to go with my boy Val Kilmer as Dieter von Kunth.
Man, I love Val Kilmer as well, and I hadn't watched this movie in a minute, and I was reflecting back, and I knew who your Mark Strong award would go to as much as you knew who mine would go to, but I was thinking in my head before I watched it, I was like, it's towards the end of his big theatrical run, as we just discussed, and I was like, where he was in his career, did he really just phone this in? And I'm trying to think, does he have big laughs? Does he ever go for it? But I watched the movie back, and he's there, he's acting, he's trying, he's putting in a performance totally worthy of the Mark Strong Award. Obviously, they wanted to cast a big name in this role, someone with a name who could bring something to the role, some respect to the role, to be a big adversary, someone that could really bring that. Andrew, what's the quality that Val Kilmer's bringing to this?
Gravitas.
That's a good one. Yeah, bring in that gravitas. Kind of the joke is that he's a big name actor going against little Will Forte, but there's a gosh. As I'm thinking about discussing this movie, I'm just thinking about the editing nightmare of trying to keep our show clean. But there's a running joke that MacGruber is gonna cut his dick off and shove it down his throat. That he threatens him with that multiple times, and there's this great oral history of MacGruber, I think Variety did, where they're discussing the movie years later, and they talked about really trying to convince Val Kilmer to make that be the finale, to have that happen to his character. And Val Kilmer was like, he wouldn't go for it, and he's like, I don't know, I don't think it'd be funny, maybe if I wasn't Val Kilmer. And they were like, it's funny because you are Val Kilmer, that's why it would be funny. They couldn't get him to go for it, so there's a conceit. Maybe we'll talk about it at the end of this, when we get to that scene, I guess. But I was thinking of that story. I was like, man, did he have too much of an ego? Did he not go for it? But again, watching the movie back for this podcast, I think he's totally locked in, totally giving a performance. And there's one scene in particular. It might actually be part of my favorite scene in the movie, so I'll save it. Where I watched that, and I'm like, yeah, Val Kilmer's having a good time. He gets the joke. He's not just here for a paycheck. Andrew, have you watched the documentary Val yet on Amazon?
I have not.
I think I recommend. It's just a great documentary, but when I think of Val Kilmer and where he is now and post-throat cancer, what it took away from him, and essentially his ability to do what he clearly loves, it feels like a tragedy. It makes me really sad that we could have had so much more from this man. And even before all that, he developed a reputation for being difficult on set. Maybe didn't quite get blacklisted from Hollywood, but clearly lost a lot of roles because of it. And it did what it did to his career. But that documentary helps me not feel so sad about it, because he is in clearly such a positive and good headspace, despite everything that he went through. And he does reflect on it, and certainly there is some sadness there, but he seems to be in such a good place despite of all that that for that reason, I recommend you in particular, or anybody who's interested in Val Kilmer's life and career, to check out that documentary. It's very touching and very well done. Highly recommend, but great choice for the Mark Strong Award. Andrew?
I agree with pretty much everything you said. I think that reputation kind of comes in the late 90s, and I think it shows in what his later output is, because there is a pretty decent run of high-profile films kind of culminating in about 96, 97. That's kind of where it feels like he's possibly at his peak as an actor. Obviously, we start things off with comedies, stuff like Top Secret, Real Genius, which are genuinely some of my favorite movies. Like, I love Top Secret. If you love Airplane, it's the same guys making just a kind of weird, almost war comedy spoof about
Elvis
Val
as
Kilmer.
James Bond.
Basically, kind of thing,
Yeah.
but they play East Germany like it's Germany in World War II. So they do a lot of weird stuff, but I genuinely love it. Actually, a very early appearance of Val Kilmer and Michael Gough, whatever you say his name, working together before Batman. But then Real Genius is just another kind of classic comedy that I love. Then obviously Top Gun, Willow, The Doors, and then 93 you get Tombstone, True Romance, which is he in True Romance a lot? I can't remember. I don't think he is.
He's Elvis in Christian Slater's mind, and I think
that's right.
He's only out of focus, like in the bathroom mirror or something. Like, you don't even get a clear shot of him.
And then obviously 95 you've got Batman Forever and Heat, and then 96 is when you get The Island of Dr. Moreau, and that's kind of where the rumors start, because he was supposed to be a big part of that movie. He wanted to work with Marlon Brando, and then kind of at the 11th hour decided he wanted a smaller role, so they had to change the script. And then obviously Marlon Brando was super difficult to work with because he's Marlon Brando. And at that point he'd been difficult to work with for like 30 years. But then 97 you kind of get The Saint, which is kind of one of the last big, it feels like semi-big budget, high profile, like that had a budget of like $90 million. I
feel like that and Ghost in the Darkness are the two I think of as late in his run. I remember watching Ghost in the Darkness a lot on cable growing up.
Ghost in the Darkness is 96, same year as Dr. Moreau, and then you get The Saint, and then Prince of Egypt, which I guess is a decently popular film from its time, but then that's where the Red Planets and the stuff like that. Like, he's in the Salton Sea, which is a great movie, but definitely not a huge high-profile thing. And then they kind of get few and far between after that. Obviously, Kiss Kiss Bang Bang in 05, another one of my favorites, but that was kind of an anomaly in his filmography at the time.
Yeah, I mean, pulling together Val Kilmer and Robert Downey Jr. both at that time, not my opinion, but is kind of seen as bottom of the barrel. Like, two people that no one wants to work with at that time. And Shane Black saw the talent, the opportunity.
Have you ever seen the Valet sketch from Key and Peele?
I don't believe so.
So they have a whole one where they talk about Valley Kilmers. That's, if I call them Valley Kilmers, that's where it's coming from, is that they say they're always talking about movies. They're always talking about things. They're talking about Liam Neeson's, all sorts of different people, Michelle Pfeiffer's, all that. But there's one where they're talking about Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man, and they're talking about Val Kilmer. And, you know, that's the line. You're like, what about my boy Valley Kilmer's and Willows, though? And they make this graph that, like, Val Kilmer starts up here, Robert Downey Jr. starts here, and they're both making movies. Their trajectories are slowly, and it's like, and then their trajectories cross at the same movie, and it's Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, and then after that, Kilmer keeps going down, and down he goes up further. I
mean, it's true.
And I mean, like, it's like, yeah, it's one of those things where, but at the same time, you know, Val Kilmer was the Batman's, so it is interesting to look at this filmography. It is interesting to think about what could have been, because, like, you know, if he maintains that high profile through the 90s, is he in like a Tom Cruise adjacent space today, where like he's this kind of distinguished veteran actor, a holdover from the movie star era, versus kind of where he ended up, which again, like you said, he's made peace with it. He seems to understand it and kind of embrace his space, but it is interesting to think about what could have been.
Alum of the show, Kristen Wiig plays Vicky. Wikipedia says Vicky Gloria St. Elmo. I don't even remember Gloria being said, but I'll go with it. All these names are perfect, Andrew. Kristen Wiig, we talked about her on Wonder Woman 1984. She's probably come up at other times. Ah, yes, Ghostbusters. Probably won a Mark Strong Award. Who knows? No way to check. No way to know.
No way to check.
But I love her. She's hilarious. She's another one. I mean, pretty similar to Will Forte. I think every comedic decision she makes really works for me. I think she's absolutely hilarious, seemingly without trying. Andrew, I know you and I have both talked about Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar multiple times.
Such a good movie. So
we're
good.
big fans. I'm big fans of everything she does. I also kind of feel similarly about her as I do about Steve Carell, where I'm like, selfishly, I want you to make 5 more comedies every single year than you're currently doing. I wish you had a larger output. I'm glad you're happy and enjoying your life, but selfishly, I just want more comedic performances from you. But she's hilarious. She can do no wrong. I think she's funny in this. Kristen Wiig, she's great.
Yeah, I know we've mentioned it on the show multiple times, but if you've not watched Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar, please, for the love of God, watch Barb and Star Go to Vista Del Mar. And read as little as you can about it before watching it, because I guarantee you that movie is not what you think it is.
1,000%. Yeah.
I thought Popstar was going to be like Barb and Star. That's kind of how I thought Popstar was going to be. Okay. Like, there was just going to be these insane twists, and then it wasn't. Popstar is still good, but Barb and Star very much was that kind of thing where, like, I turned it on and I was like, all right, what? Hey, who? That's like, just blows my mind. I love that movie so much. Is there a 4K of Barb and Star? If there's not, there should be. And I'm probably guessing there's not, because life is pain. And it's still one of the best movies I've ever seen. And Kristen Wiig is fantastic in it. And no. Wait.
I think digitally there is. I don't know if there's a physical release.
There is. I am mistaken. Don't listen to me, folks. Go buy it on 4K. Anyway, Kristen Wiig is great. And she's playing the same character here largely that she does in the skits. Just MacGruber's assistant that kind of has to get pulled back in to the field, but then does it herself anyway. But yeah, she's great.
Ryan Phillippe plays Lieutenant Dixon Piper.
Another alum of the show.
Dixon Piper is also a pretty good name. Alum of the show. When did we talk about Ryan Phillippe? I know what you did last summer. Yeah. Ryan Phillippe, great actor. I don't know what happened to this man's star power, because late 90s, early 2000s, he was, Cruel Intentions, I Know What You Did Last Summer. He was like hotshot, cocky brat character. Like, you go to Ryan Phillippe. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's still working to this day. His career is doing just fine. I think maybe Lincoln Lawyers around this time. That was maybe one of the last
Lincoln
really,
Lawyers
really
the next
high-profile
year.
things I remember from Ryan Phillippe. But yeah, he's great. His job is to be the straight man on the team, because you have Will Forte, who's just absurd. Kristen Wiig gets to kind of ride a line between not being as absurd as Will Forte, but still having her comedic moments. Whereas Ryan Phillippe is pretty much always just the straight man or butt of the joke. And God bless him for doing it.
Butt of the celery, Chris.
You want to do the fat end. It sounds counterintuitive, but it'll slide right out easier.
Jesus Christ. He does come back for the show, doesn't he?
He does, yeah.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I mean, we've talked about him before. He's great. He's doing exactly what he needs to do here.
Powers Booth, we mentioned already, but he's Colonel Jim Faith. Really, really playing the straight man. I mean, he's the guy in charge. He's the one that brings MacGruber back. He's the one that partners him up with Ryan Phillippe's character. He's giving you the stakes. He's talking
also
about
alum of the show.
Sin City, A Dame to Kill For?
Yes.
Right? Yes, alum of the show. Maybe he got a Mark Strong Award, Andrew. Who
no way to tell.
Knows? No way to tell. But he's great. I mean, again, you need someone, we ought to use the gravitas bit, but here's some more gravitas for someone that shows that the military, isn't messing around when it comes to tracking down Kunt. And, I don't know, it's Powers Booth. He's a legend. What is there to say about, it's Powers Booth. It's Booth.
There's nothing else you can say. It's Booth. It's Booth, man. Obviously, Sin City, A Dame to Kill For, the original Sin City. MacGruber, he's in Tombstone. He's in Sudden Death, which is the Jean-Claude Van Damme Die Hard during a hockey game movie, where he plays, again, the straight villain to Jean-Claude Van Damme's nonsense. But yeah, he's great. It's fantastic. And here he's playing the straight man, but the things he has to say being the straight man in this movie is just patently ridiculous. Also, rest in peace, Powers Booth, no longer with us, passed away from pancreatic cancer in 2017. Otherwise, maybe he's in the show too, and it's not Fish.
Andrew, let's talk about this movie. Let's talk about these scenes, and let's start with the high point, the best scene in the movie, or at least our personal favorite. In your opinion, when is this movie firing at all cylinders? What's the best scene in MacGruber?
I mentioned it when I was talking about Val Kilmer, but the scene where he captures MacGruber and like where Kunth captures MacGruber, kind of right before the big finale where MacGruber's able to disarm the warhead, and they have their whole argument where he has to scream at MacGruber that he's the one that's trying to frame him. Like, that was the moment, like, if I was laughing along, if I was fully invested in what was happening in that moment, that was it. Where just, MacGruber just... Anytime MacGruber runs into a villain, he just seems to think they're always being genuine in what they're saying. Like, he never, assumes they're being villains. He just got, so he's like, so when he tells him, I've got your manifesto that says the government said this and that you launched that warhead attack on the government to do this, MacGruber's literally just like, I didn't do that. You got to believe me, man. I didn't do this. It's not me. And he has to literally, in his frustration, goes, it's me. And then, at certain points, it pans over to Ryan Phillippe, and he's also just like, for the love of God, how are you not on getting this? Like, what is not being understood? And the banter here is just really, really great between Val Kilmer and Will Forte. Again, these are the moments where you're saying Val Kilmer he's giving it his all. Like I said, I know there's the behind the scenes stuff, but he's playing off of him. Even if he is phoning it in, he's playing off of him perfectly well, making this scene all the funnier because of it. And I'm just going to segue into the missile de-arming that happens after this, where he's chained to the rail, and he looks like Val Kilmer's looking up at him, disabling the missile, and he's just like, ha! He's laughing at him. MacGruber's like, oh yeah? Well, what if it doesn't have its nuclear payload? And reaches up into the missile and jostles around and then pulls it out. And Val Kilmer's face is literally just like, no! I can't believe you've done this. And then he's like, well, the missile's still going to blow up the White House and Congress. It's got enough ammonium nitrate to do that. And he's like, not if it doesn't have its. And he reaches up and jostles around again and pulls it out and goes, guidance system. And Val Kilmer's literally again just like, no! Ah!
Yeah, I love how the solution isn't, because you can't disarm it. There's too many wires. He's more like a 3-wire guy. But he makes it less powerful and directionless, so it's still going to launch. It's just going to go somewhere and do some damage, but not as much.
Not as much. And so I love this scene. Great. I love the way this all unfolds. This kind of big finale. And it's got Val Kilmer and Will Forte both dialed in and doing their best.
It's good. It's a good pick, and it's got one of the moments where I feel like Val Kilmer is putting in a performance here, because he captures MacGruber, his henchmen hold him down, and they have him cut part of MacGruber's mullet off. It's a huge dramatic thing. And then Val Kilmer as Kunth dances around holding his mullet up to the back of his head and does this goofy dance. And it's some of those moments where I'm like, okay, Val Kilmer's having fun. He gets the nature of what he's in. He's showing up to play. And dude, Will Forte's face in the slow motion shot after they cut off his mullet before he does the backflip to escape. I don't even know how you can physically make a face like that.
I guess. Teeth exposed,
he looks like a Wallace and Gromit character, with the trapezoid shape of his mouth. It's hilarious. Man. It kills me. It gets me every time. I think this is fantastic. And this is also the one time in the movie where they essentially do the MacGruber skit. They've got, 2 minutes, MacGruber, to disarm the warhead. And he asked for, a wire and some pliers and some different things. But instead of disarming the warhead, he makes an engagement ring and proposes, wasting time. And then we're down to 1 minute, and he's trying to, if this were a skit, it would end with him exploding. But in this case, he's able to somewhat disarm the warhead and escape. So, yeah, it's the one time they actually call back to the original sketches. Finally, at the end of this 90-minute movie, they get around to like what the sketches are actually about. But Andrew, it's a good pick. I love it. I like that we got our Mark Strong Award winners interacting in in your favorite scene. I'm gonna pick a different one. I mean, there's a lot of different ways I could go because I love this movie. I think it's hilarious, and I just love so many scenes. But the scene that I'm gonna go with has a very specific type of comedy that I think is, I don't know if subtle's the right word, but it's what makes this movie special to me. And I see you preparing yourself. It's not the scene that you're thinking, Andrew. Don't worry.
Okay.
We will get to that. We will get to that.
Oh, no.
I love the scene where like they finally become a team. They're finally bonding, and they're at like essentially like a safe house, and you got the three of them there, and they have dialogue that feels like it's friendly camaraderie type dialogue, but it's ridiculous. Like Kristen Wiig's about to go into the house, and MacGruber's like, number 1 or number 2? And she's like, number none of your business. And he's got, that means it's number 2. And like, it's got the rhythm of friends joking around, but it's just odd dialogue. But once she's inside, Ryan Phillippe's character is calling MacGruber out on the fact that they obviously like each other, but MacGruber's explaining that they can never actually be together. And there's a quick one-off joke here where MacGruber says, "You're loco, man," and then the subtitles explain, "You're crazy, man." They translate that one line. Fantastic joke. But MacGruber gives the backstory. We know at this point that MacGruber's wife-to-be, played by Maya Rudolph, who we'll talk about, was killed on their wedding day by Kunth, and that's why they have this vendetta. And he made a vow that he would never be with another woman, and that's why he can't be with Vicky San Elmo. And Ryan Phillippe, he asked him, he's like, why did he do it? And MacGruber explained, he's like, to this day, I have no idea. We actually used to all be friends back in college. And you get this flashback where you see Val Kilmer looking like 50-something-year-old, 60-year-old Val Kilmer, but with like short hair, playing on a guitar, laughing. And that's one of the moments where I'm like, okay, Val Kilmer's come to play. Like, he's having a good time. It's great.
He's in.
And he explains that they were all friends back in college, and Kunth had a girlfriend, and they were going to be married, and he asked MacGruber to be the best man. And that's when MacGruber started having an affair with Kunth's wife-to-be, and she decided to leave him, and she was pregnant with his child. Of course, he asked her to terminate so they could have a fresh start, and she agreed to. And ever since then, for some reason, Kunth has had a vendetta against him. And the way that he lays out this story, where it's so obvious that MacGruber's the bad guy, but all in a way where it sounds, he thinks he's innocent of anything, and he's talking about having sex with Kunth's woman and the abortion. It's so awful and graphic, but something about the juxtaposition between the dialogue being the cadence you expect from this story, but what's actually being said is almost 180 degrees different, I think is actually smart. Like, this is a dumb movie, but it takes a certain craft to make that scene work, if you think it works, and I do, that I want to highlight this as my favorite scene of the movie.
I love how Ryan Phillippe reacts during this story, because he's like genuinely like uncomfortably like looking anywhere but at MacGruber the whole time, where you can tell he's just like, oh God, like, why are you telling me this so casually? Like, I don't understand. And it's very, very funny. Yeah, that scene of Val Kilmer playing the guitar with like the giant flat top thing he's got going on or whatever, like, it's ridiculous and perfect.
And I love it's like a 5-second shot of him playing guitar. So I love, it's probably 2 hours of their day to get that shot set up and get his pompadour right and everything, and just add that little shot. It's fantastic. It's great, and that scene ends with the bad guys catching up to him, And MacGruber uses Ryan Phillippe as a human shield, and he gets riddled with bullets on both sides of his body as they make their escape. And Dixon Piper says, "Man, how did you know I was wearing a bulletproof vest?" And MacGruber says, "You're wearing a vest?" Great.
It's very cool the Deadpool and Wolverine homage to that scene with except swapping a bulletproof
spoilers?
vest for oh fine, whatever.
I mean,
cut it. Who cares?
It's just gonna be a long bleep. if they know, they know.
I don't think it's that much of a spoiler, but whatever.
We'll see.
Just cut it.
No, it's gonna be a long bleep. It's funnier that way.
Cut it here. I love the gag throughout the entire movie that MacGruber takes his radio out of his car every time he gets out of his car.
Hilarious. I love it. Hilarious.
Because obviously the fear is someone will steal his radio because he never puts the top of his car up. So like, the whole thing is he turns off his car, takes out the radio, and like anytime he goes anywhere, like even after the radio gets damaged and he pulls up to Kristen Wiig's house and they're about to go have sex for the first time, he like pulls the damaged, battered radio out of the car to carry it with him.
Yank it out with both hands.
Like it has to like really work to get it out of there. And
that's such a late 90s, early 2000s thing.
Well, yeah,
like
it's such like a holdover of a different time.
Yes.
I remember my dad used to have a radio that the faceplate came off.
Yes, that's exactly what I was going to say.
That was so like it would.
It's rendered useless without all the buttons.
Well, and then you would just put that in a case and hide it somewhere. So
yeah,
if they found it, it didn't matter. Like if you found it, it didn't matter. That's like the age, like the old club steering wheel locks that you would get. I remember actually understanding that gag in Robin Hood Men in Tights when someone used a club thing on their horse. Because my dad had one for his car, but in Robin Hood Men in Tights, someone takes it's literally like a standing thing to put your horse's head through, and you pull it up and lock it in so the horse doesn't go anywhere. Yeah, every time he pulls the radio, and then at one point he goes to the party, she's like, "Can I park your car?" He's like, "Nice try." And she's like, "Can I take the radio?" Nice. Like says it again, she's like, not gonna fall for that one. But yeah, that's the one gag throughout the movie too that hit me every time. Anytime he just yanked the radio out of his car.
It's good. And then there's the car that drives by his car and says, "Hey, nice car." That's the extent of their insult. And he quickly memorizes their license plate. And it's this multi-layered joke because a few scenes later, Ryan Phillippe's character finds a notebook of MacGruber's, and as he flips through the pages, it's clear he is only obsessing about this car. It's got the license plate written over and over and over and over in a real erratic way. And then he comes to a drawing, a very crude drawing of MacGruber taking a poop on their car. A 5-year-old drew it. And then finally he does find the car, outside Vicky's house, and he keys it and blows it up.
Yep.
It's good. It's good stuff, Andrew. Andrew, there's some sex scenes in this
yeah,
movie.
There are.
So my note is just, how did they film these without laughing, without dying laughing? Because it's again one of those things where visually, the look of it, it's got a romantic song playing, it's got slow motion, it's got their skin glistening in the low light of the bed. And, it's got all the hallmarks of a action movie of the 80s having their sensual sex scene. But a few things are off. You see his butt a little too much. Or Kristen Wiig pokes her finger in his belly button, which is a very, not sexual thing. And then there's this hard cut where the music stops and you hear the actual audio of them having sex. And Will Forte is thrusting as hard as he can, making the most non-sexy noises. I mean, I'm not going to imitate it on the podcast just for the sake of everyone.
Please
but it is hilarious, and it's the most awkward moment of the movie when I'm watching it with my mom, because I'm dying of laughter, but this is so weird to be watching, and it goes on for such a long time. And he's announcing that he's almost done in a very funny way. And again, I think it was in that oral history in MacGruber Variety where they talked about they were covered in this gel, to make them glisten. But as he thrust above Kristen Wiig, like it was dripping off of him like onto her face, and he just felt so bad. He was soaking her, and she can't laugh as he's doing this. It's the funniest sex scene I've ever seen in a movie, and it's only topped by the fact that immediately afterwards, MacGruber leaves the room in shame because he broke the vow to his wife. He goes to his wife's tombstone. His dead wife, played by Maya Rudolph, appears to him in the cemetery. She's glowing. She says, "It's okay, go on." But then the romantic music starts playing and they start kissing. And then we do the exact same joke where the music drops off and you just see MacGruber thrusting his wife on top of her headstone. But there's an added joke here where his wife's not actually there. She's a ghost. So a man looks over at him and just sees a naked Will Forte humping.
Thrusting into nothing.
It's so... it's so funny, Andrew. It's so awkward and so funny. And this makes me die of laughter when I watch it. I'm curious what your reaction is as you watch this scene.
I can't say it here.
I mean, is it just awkward for you? Is it funny? Do you think it's funny? Do you think this is working for somebody? It's not working for me. What is your honest? We're hashtag positivity podcast. I'm bringing the positivity. I love this movie. But Andrew, what do you think of the sex scenes of this film?
I thought they were real dumb. like the minute the music, like, don't get me wrong, I thought the whole joke was that just they were having super awkward sex with each other, right. And then like it cut and he was making the noises and I was like, this is the most off-putting noise I've ever heard a human make. And I realized that's probably the joke, but yes. Like I genuinely was just like, I am not okay listening to this noise. And then they did it again and I was like, why are you putting me through this? I don't understand.
That is just a cornerstone of Will Forte, like the
yes,
last man on Earth. To go back to that show, and I guess slight spoilers for that show. He's not the last man on Earth. There's a small group of people living in a post-apocalyptic world, and he just continuously screws things up for everyone, over and over and over again, by making the dumbest decisions and being a total ass. And it's hysterical, but it cringe, as the kids say. If you can't handle the cringe, maybe it might be a tough watch for you. But if it's up your alley, man, you're in for a treat. Totally works for me. I think these are hilarious sex scenes, and you're welcome, Andrew. I did not recreate noises because I can. I'm capable of doing it, Andrew. But I will spare everyone.
Your discretion is appreciated.
I love the very beginning of this movie. Very, very beginning. We're introducing Kunth. We're seeing him like steal the warhead. But then it almost immediately goes into this montage of these declassified papers. And you see like former Green Beret and Ranger. And one of them says skilled lover as it's describing him. And you've got this montage of him like in a steel mill, again, harkening back to like 80s and 90s action movies that always end up in some kind of warehouse or factory. But his silhouette is playing the saxophone that we hear in the opening music. It's fantastic and really sets the tone for what we are in for. Which, I don't know, this isn't exactly like, I mean, I guess it is. Would you call this like a parody of 80s, 90s? Because it's not like a Hot Shots type parody, but
no,
it's still drawing enough inspiration. I feel like you could qualify it as a parody.
It's definitely a satire type thing, because like the whole joke at the offset is that MacGruber is not good at this, but yet is treated by like people like faith that he is. So that is just juxtaposed by how awful he is at it. So, I mean, it's definitely not like a Hot Shots or an Airplane type situation or anything like that, where like there's sight gags and there's like a spoof. I guess it's not a spoof. It's more of like a satire. I don't know if there's really differences in these words at the end of the day, but there's definitely a clearly taking on the idea of like the unstoppable action hero of the Commando or the First Blood or whatever you want to call, and just like, yeah, but what if that guy was really bad at it? And that's essentially what the premise here is.
Andrew, perhaps the most notorious joke in the movie, most well known, is when he's first recruited to take on Kunth. He decides to round up a team, get the team together. He doesn't want to use Ryan Phillippe, no rookies. He's got his own people. So he gets the gang back together, and we get a recruitment montage. Everyone he recruits is played by at the time, WWE superstar, as they're called, or a wrestler. Probably biggest role going to Chris Jericho, who actually gets to have a few lines. And Jericho's actually talked about this moment several times, like interviews on his podcast, because Jericho trained with the Groundlings for a year, and I got to do a little improv on set here. They have this back and forth where MacGruber makes a dick joke, and Chris Jericho says, I love when you make those jokes. And he says, that's why I like telling them. And then Chris Jericho responds with, that's why I like hearing them. And then he says, that's why I say them. That's why I listen to them. At any rate, that was improv on scene. The fact that they went back and forth so many times about that. But the joke here is that he's recruiting these big, huge, muscly guys. You got Chris Jericho. You got MVP. You got the Great Khali. Who else do we got here, Andrew? He
Mark
tries
Henry.
to recruit Mark Henry, yeah.
Kane.
Kane. I mean, we're batting like 500 with like actually good people in real life. Hashtag PP. And then you got Big Show, but he changes his mind after Big Show starts kissing a man, and he scratches his name off. It's a homophobic joke, doesn't age well. But the point is, we get all of these wrestlers into a van, and he's like, he's at the tarmac. They're about to head out on the mission. They're all excited to go. And he goes, all right, he's got to go talk to the brass real quick. And he goes over to Power's booth and Ryan Phillippe, and he's bragging about the team that he got together. And he's telling Ryan Phillippe how he will never be on his team because he's got the best of the best all in his van. And they're packed up and they're ready to go. And they're loaded up with the homemade C4 that he packed himself. And as soon as he says that, the van explodes in the background. And they're all dead. We have this whole montage of him recruiting them. And they're all gone, and then Will Forte immediately goes to his pathetic Will Forte that he's so good at playing. He's like, oh, no, Tug, you guys okay? No.
Tell me someone's still alive.
And they're all dead. And it's a good joke, Andrew.
It's clearly his fault. That's the other thing, too. Like,
Yeah.
This is another instance where, like, this is clearly the actions of MacGruber that have gotten somebody else killed, and it's still, MacGruber still really doesn't play it that way. It's almost like there's a theme throughout this movie that MacGruber is, again, not good at this. And also maybe not the best person, but he's pretty funny while he's doing it.
It makes no sense, because Powers Booth pulls him out of retirement because he clearly has a good track record. Maybe something happened in those 10 years of retirement. I don't know. I mean, like, watching the movie wrong is really trying to figure that out. But, MacGruber is not good.
And also, there's like, if you look at the headlines at the beginning, like, there's one where it's like MacGruber foils attempt, but 200 people killed in the process or something. Like, it's this. So there's clearly a thing that I guess the idea with MacGruber is that he achieves the goal, but maybe on the path causes a lot more trouble than it's worth. And but yeah, I remember seeing that. It's like it specifically called out that 200 people still died, and I was like,
if you were to take a realistic approach to like First Blood, Rambo, Commando, you would have the same headlines. Like, those people have insane amount of collateral damage on their missions.
Yeah, and it's I mean, you look at a Commando. Like, how many innocent people die in Commando? Lots of them. Like, it's the death numbers are pretty high. So I do like that they make the joke of that. So it is odd that, like, Powers Booth, and maybe the joke is that Powers Booth is kind of an idiot too. I don't know, but he keeps supporting this man despite the fact that he's clearly incompetent. But at the same time, results are results, and sometimes you gotta shove a stick of celery up your butt.
I love the scene in Powers Booth's office after he loses his whole team. They're talking about the funerals, and MacGruber says, "What'd you think of my eulogies?" And Powers Booth says, I want to cut back on the F words. And MacGruber says, well, they were fucking great guys. And this was a fucking asshole of a day.
I mean, folks.
His potty mouth gets me every time. Just so I can keep all of my bleeps like in one section. I also love when they kill the bad guy, and he's speaking as if he's saying a clever quip, but he just says, "Dead at the age of who the fuck cares." Andrew, look, we've mentioned the celery now a number of times. That is MacGruber's diversion, because MacGruber can use random items at his disposal to cleverly trick the bad guys. And in this case, what he does is strips naked from head to toe, puts a stick of celery between his butt cheeks, smiles really big, and waddles out in front of the bad guys to distract and confuse them so Ryan Phillippe can then shoot them all. And his plan works. Call him crazy, but he gets results.
Yeah. I mean, it works so much that Ryan Phillippe makes a point to be like, I will never, ever do that. And if I were a YouTuber, I would be like, hints early on in movies that would, Easter eggs you didn't notice about in a movie the first time you watched it. Because then later, Ryan Phillippe does do the celery up his butt trick. And yes, folks, that's called foreshadowing.
It's good. Respect to Ryan Phillippe. They make it a point to show that, like, that is him. Like, they pan from his face down to his butt to show, like, we don't have a butt double for Ryan Phillippe. He just went for it. The celery scene is probably 20, 30 minutes into the movie. That's where, like, you're in or out. Either, like, you're on board with the absurdity of this movie, or maybe this comedy is not going to be for you. It's later on in that same scene that he does the most MacGyver-esque thing, where they're taking out all the bad guys, and he's going to put together a homemade explosive, he says. And then there's one last bad guy to shoot, and he stops Ryan Phillippe from doing it. He goes, no, I got this. And he throws his homemade bomb, which is a tennis ball, down onto the floor. The bad guy drives off without incident. A few seconds pass, and then some smoke comes out of his explosive. Yep. It's fantastic.
Yep. Very good. Yeah, that got me too. Just he's sitting there, he's like, I'm busy. Like, can I use your gun to stir this? He's like, just use your fingers. I'm using the gun. There's obviously the running gag throughout the film that MacGruber doesn't use guns, and then you eventually find out it's because MacGruber doesn't know how to use guns.
Yeah. So you think it's going to be tied to, like, a backstory or a tragic thing or whatever, but he just
accidentally shot somebody. Yeah. And then, like, the scene, he runs through the warehouse, and he's just, like, waving his hands around, firing these guns, accidentally hitting people, and then before they run into the room, he throws the guns at them and ducks into the space, and then, like, the first thing Ryan Phillippe says is, where are the guns? And MacGruber's like, it doesn't matter right now.
Something I didn't notice until this watch is that one of Kunt's henchmen, one of the ones that throw MacGruber out of the party and break his stereo, is played by Derek Mears, who is a very distinct looking actor who you've certainly seen before.
Alum of the show.
Some of his most high profile alum of the show? What, Ninja Turtles? I'm looking through his filmography right now, and the Friday the 13th remake was what I was going to cite as maybe his biggest role, but he also did the Hills Have Eyes remake.
He's also Metalhead in Wild Wild West.
There it is. Yeah. Very tall gentleman with no
alopecia
hair on his body. Yes. Which gives him, again, a pretty distinct look, but has done tons of cool stuff. And yeah, he's a henchman here. And he's interviewed a lot in the, what's it called? Memories of Camp Crystal Lake. It's a documentary about every Friday the 13th movie. And he just seems like a really cool dude.
Crystal Lake Memories.
There it is. Highly recommend it if you have, 7 hours to spare.
Also plays Swamp Thing in the Swamp Thing show they made a few years ago. And
which I still haven't seen, Andrew. I hear it's awesome.
I hear it's very good.
He was also in the lead of Battle Angel. I don't feel so bad now.
No, I don't watch anything, man.
I loved a few times we get to see MacGruber's handwriting. Like when he's trying to recruit Vicky St. Elmo, and she turns him down the first time because she's focusing on his music
career.
So he passes her a note, says, well, this is where you could find me. And then after he walks out, she opens it up and just very crudely says, at the Pentagon, like in like a pencil.
Child's writing, yeah.
And then he sets up this big elaborate trap at the, in the final face-off with Kunth. He's in their control room, and he announces where he is. We're in the control room. Come and get me. And he sets up this big elaborate trap. So as soon as the bad guys walk in, this like solo cup of water drops down, but it misses everybody, and it's just like 5 ounces of water. And then taped to a dead body he leaves behind says, ha ha, you're all wet, but it's like the wrong form of your.
I like his
comic gold.
I like when they go into the nightclub because they're looking for Kunth, and he knows that Kunth owns the club, so he just like busts in and like he stops the party first by threatening to kill Kristen Wiig, and then he's like, no, she's with me, she's fine. And then he's like, he just berates the crowd like openly, and then like speaks to them, and he's like, and we're gonna be at this diner or something tomorrow at this time, and he like makes this whole scene, throws the mic through the window, like blows everything up, and then they walk outside, and it's like, they're both like, why did you do that? He's like, now he knows exactly where you are, and he's like, and that's the idea. Just again, the classic MacGruber logic of, I'm just gonna be as obvious as possible and hope for the best. And then it cuts to Val Kilmer painting an odd, like, abstract picture of a topless, naked old woman.
I always forget about that scene, and then go, oh, yeah, okay. Old naked woman. Yeah.
Old naked woman.
And he's commanding his henchman, wet her, and he sprays her with the spray bottle.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's good. It's good stuff. Andrew, at the end of this movie, MacGruber finally marries Vicky St. Elmo, but it turns out Kunth has survived, and he shows up with half of his body burned, and he tries to murder Vicky St. Elmo, but thankfully, he just kills the priest. Not a big deal. He gets blown up. And then we have one last face-off between Kunth and MacGruber. This time, well, this is where we would have the scene where he lives up to his promise of cutting off his dick and shoving it down his throat, but it's revealed that that part of him was lost in the explosion, so he's unable to do that. So he's upset that he doesn't get the satisfaction that he's been dreaming of. So instead, he throws him off of a cliff. Ryan Phillippe throws him a machine gun. He riddles him with bullets on his way down. Once he crashes to the ground, he then pees on his body. And that's the last thing our hero does in the movie.
Indeed.
And it's great. It's a perfect film. 10 out of 10. Highly recommend. One of my favorite comedies of all time. Probably in my top 5.
Yes, it is.
And that brings SNL month to a close, Andrew. Something we could potentially revisit in the future. There's a few that we still have not covered, and they certainly qualify. And maybe they'll make some. When's the last time they made an SNL adaptation? Do we have that list up? Are they still doing this?
There was one that was like semi-adjacent, and it was like a movie I'd never heard of. And but yeah, it's called Please Don't Destroy the Treasure of Foggy Mountain, and it's made by like a comedy group called Please Don't Destroy, who are apparently part of like the SNL group. So they do pre-recorded sketches on SNL. I'd never heard of them before, ever. So they'd only started doing them in like 2021. So, but they list that as an SNL film, which just seems kind of odd to me because I don't know that it's a sketch, but as far as like, yeah, MacGruber was the last one, and it was the first one since The Ladies' Man, which was made in 2000. So
I've got to think the collapse of the home video market pretty much kills the profitability factor of an SNL adaptation. Streaming, maybe. Peacock.
I mean, MacGruber got a show, so MacGruber's still out there somehow living on, but
that is true, and highly recommend the series. It's like the reason I signed up.
Sam Elliott shows up in his dad in the series, though, doesn't he?
That's true. I guess that would be the canon than above
I
the
guess.
Super Bowl ad.
Above MacGruber. MacGyver is a much funnier name, though.
It is. But that's all SNL for now, Andrew. We are moving into the month of August. Can you believe it? August. I feel like we're in the first quarter of 2024. I feel like, 2024 just started. Something came out 2023. That was just a few months ago. But no, we're like over the halfway point of the year. We're rapidly approaching the holidays. Where is time going? Where's the summer going, Andrew? August is going to end our summer. And appropriately, we will be covering summer camp films all month long during August. We're going to kick it off next week with Friday the 13th. Not the reboot or remake or nothing new. We're going all the way back to the OG, baby, because that is certainly a summer camp movie. And believe it or not, it's not well received despite its legacy. We'll jump into legacy. All of those details next week as we cover Friday the 13th. But man, summer camp, this is a fun category because you can really get a lot of different genres that relate to summer camp. If you want to see the entire lineup, hop into our Discord. There's a link in our show notes. We will show you every film we're covering next month, and you can weigh in on your positive thoughts. We'll read them on a future episode. Andrew, how are you feeling about the end of summer coming up?
I don't like it.
Because it's...
Let me rephrase that. I don't like it for passage of time reasons. I do like it for the sake of getting out of these hot temperatures.
Oh, cry me a river, Mr. Chicago, man.
You know, it gets hot in places beyond Texas, right?
Yeah, for a few months out of the year. You can deal with it. You can suck it up. I joke, Andrew. Complain all you want. It is...
You know what I never have to deal with? I don't need a generator at my house because the power infrastructure in Illinois is built to handle the temperature. That's not a shot at you. It's a shot at the leadership of the state of Texas.
Everyone getting strays today. Friday the 13th. Next month. Andrew, you excited? This will be the first time we talk about a horror movie outside of our usual October horror month.
Yeah, I think so. Unless you count Morbius, but it's and it's a bit of an outlier amongst the rest of the lineup. You know, I know we'll announce the full lineup later. The rest are all largely comedies, but saw a chance to throw this one in, and I wouldn't say it quite fits in with what our current plans for October are. So it was fun to be able to fit this one in.
As always, I ask that you leave us a positive review if you enjoy this show. You can leave a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify or YouTube. Do they do reviews there yet? Are you listening to us on YouTube? Wherever you are, let the people know that you enjoy the show. And come back next week for Friday the 13th. And until then, just remember, maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can follow him on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. Check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. And check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.